Whenever I play Warhammer 40k Darktide or Vermintide 2, one of my favorite ways to play the game is with a good old-fashioned ranged playstyle. Although I derive a lot of enjoyment out of cleaving through hordes of enemies in melee combat, at the end of the day, I just prefer to shoot zombies in the face. And for the longest time, the veteran in Darktide has been my go-to way to do that. Hop into the veteran, choose the plasma gun, recon last gun, or even the bolt gun, and mow through hordes of zombies. But nowadays, I find myself playing the veteran less and less in Darktide, and that's because of several factors, but I've really narrowed it down to just two. And those two reasons are that there are other ranged playstyles in the game now that are significantly better and require much less effort in order to succeed on, and the veteran has been nerfed over the course of the past few years, and it hasn't received any significant buffs to compensate for those nerfs. The point of this video is not to propose an entire overhaul to the veteran. I actually don't really think that it needs it. But I do think that it's ironic that the class that is effectively just an Imperial Guardsman is performing exactly how an Imperial Guardsman would perform when you compare it against something like the Qatari, this elite mech warrior. And speaking of the Qatari, let's talk about some of those other ranged playstyles that Darktide now offers. So let's start by addressing the elephant in the room, the Qatari. A Qatari that's building around the arc rifle is able to do what the old veteran building around a plasma gun was able to do, but nowadays much more efficiently, requiring much less ammunition and in a way safer manner. In less than 30 seconds, even if a Qatari is leaning on Newspheric Command in order to deal with specials and save on ammunition, they're able to do it again because they're able to reactivate Voltaic Emitter at least 2 or 3 charges preferably in order to get that sweet buff that applies electrocution to any enemy that they hit, which applies to your arc rifle. And whenever you're doing this with something like the Redline Capacitor's Keystone, then you're getting upwards of 15% toughness regeneration per second after you've picked up a couple of kills once you've shot the arc rifle once or twice after ability activation, and all gunners on the screen aren't shooting you anymore, and all melee enemies in a radius around you are electrocuted and stunned. This is perhaps the easiest and safest ranged playstyle in the game that massively contributes to the team in the form of being able to screen wipe every 30 seconds or so. And because of the amount of brutalness that you're applying to enemies, and because of the fact that arcs just do decent damage against carapace anyways, you're also wiping crushers off of the screen. And this is before even considering the applications of the AoE provided by the Purgator Servo Skull. But hey, that's just the Qatari. It's a new class, it's meant to be powerful so that Fat Shark can actually make sales. Let's talk about a class that's been around for a long time. Let's talk about the Ogryn, which is a much more fair comparison because there are some major drawbacks to playing as the Ogryn in terms of ammo efficiency and economy. Ranged Ogryns primarily build around two weapons in particular, the Twinling Stubbers or the Rumbler. And both playstyles are extremely effective, but the Rumbler does pull ahead because it's doing damage to everything on the screen at the same time. Where the Gunlugger Ogryn really shines is when nobody else on the team really needs ammunition to make their builds work. And you'll see this for a lot of melee builds, such as with Zealots, or with Arbitrators, and of course with the classes like Psyker or Hive Scum. What the Rumbler Ogryn shares in common with the Qatari is that the Rumbler acts as a universal multi-tool, and that it's able to deal with every problem on the screen, including crushers. And for those of you who don't know, Point Blank Barrage was recently buffed. It had 30 seconds shaved off of its cooldown. Because of the intrinsic nature of the explosions from the Rumbler causing stagger to everything that is affected by them, this gives the Ogryn access to something similar to what this Qatari has. Whenever you activate your ability, Point Blank Barrage in this instance, you're also crowd controlling nearly everything on the screen. So this is another instance of being able to effectively spam another ability under 30 seconds. For point blank barrage, it might actually just be 15 seconds, and play the game in a way where the game can't actually really counter you unless it throws a boss or the twins or a captain at you. Or a silent special, but I'm pretty sure that's not intentional. At least I hope it isn't. And nowadays, whenever the Ogryn is playing with the Twinling Stubbers, they don't really have the ammo efficiency issues that they used to have in the past because of how Point Blank Barrage now works, and that it refunds 50% of the shots that you fire while you're in Point Blank Barrage. The trade-off between these two builds is that whenever you're using the Twinling Stubbers, you have much higher survivability, and that you can sit there and just tank all day because your toughness regeneration is absolutely insane. But hey, maybe this is another unfair comparison, and these are simply two instances of the Qatari and the Ogryn having access to really good weapons. This is where the Hive scum comes in, and its ranged playstyle that revolves around Desperado offers a much closer comparison to what the veteran's ranged DPS build revolving around something like Executioner stance would ideally look like. The major trade-off between the Hive scum compared to the veteran is that the Hive scum doesn't really print its most effective grenades like the veteran does. You can print blackout grenades, and you can use them as anti-crowds, anti-crushers, or anti-whatever, but your rocket launcher and the chem grenade, which are much more effective grenades, are grenades that you have to loot off the floor. Otherwise, the Hive scum just simply has better survivability because it's a faster class, and when you master mobility in this game, you can survive all sorts of crazy things. And it just never runs out of ammo because of how Desperado and Pickpocket work. The chassis of the actual Hive scum ranged playstyle is much stronger than the veterans because it means that you can slot several ranged weapons into the playstyle, and they all just work. If the Hive scum had access to something like the plasma gun or something akin to the Rumbler, then this would likely be one of the deadliest ranged playstyles in the game. Now, in an environment where it was more viable to play as a ranged playstyle, where you're able to do more at longer ranges, such as anything more than 20 meters, then you can argue that, hey, the veteran is bringing much more damage to the table at way further ranges, but with the way that endgame Darktide works, most engagements are fought within 20 meters. They're all close-range engagements. The Hive scum is actually the class that I've been playing more and more nowadays. It's extremely fun to bring into solos because it's very intense to play, and I feel like the skill ceiling for the Hive scum is significantly higher than what the skill ceiling for the veteran is, because with the veteran, you're limited by things such as mobility or even something as simple as ammo efficiency. But let's stop comparing the veteran to the other ranged playstyles. Let's talk about what the veteran actually excels in nowadays. My colleague Big Dom refers to the veteran as the best force multiplier in the game, and I tend to agree with him. When you pair a veteran with the ranged Qatari build or with the Rumbler Ogryn build, you facilitate those playstyles. You let them do their crazy screen wiping more often and much more reliably. They never have to worry about running out of ammo. And if you're bringing something like smoke grenades into a Havoc 40 run, then you effectively shut down all of the gunners in that run. And again, nullifying gunners is extremely important in Havoc. And if you're running voice of command, then you also nullify or mitigate things like silent specials because you're giving golden toughness to your team. So the veteran is an excellent support class, up there with the chorus of spiritual fortitude zealot, but I'm not really the kind of player that likes to play as support classes. It's not really my go-to playstyle in these kinds of games. And there have primarily been 4 major veteran nerfs that have effectively brought us to where we are with the class today. The Survivalist nerf that added a 5-second cooldown to the Survivalist aura effect, the Voice of Command nerf that added 10 more seconds to the ability's cooldown, the Demolition Stockpile nerf that added 30 more seconds of cooldown to crack grenades specifically, and of course the Plasma Gun nerf that effectively eliminated its ability to have nearly infinite cleave. The reason why these things were all nerfed is because they were making the game too easy. They were making a lot of different runs a little too safe. Unfortunately, because the veteran relied on these tools in order to do things like survive or just maintain ammo throughout an entire run, the veteran now has to play their heart out in order to replicate the same damage or survivability that the other ranged classes have access to with a quarter of the effort. I don't know what the fix to this problem is because I don't know if there's even a problem here to begin with. I'm perfectly fine with the veteran effectively being one of the better support classes in the game instead of being a pure ranged DPS class like the Hive Scum or the PBB Ogryn or the Arc Rifle Qatari. And I don't know if a veteran rework is planned at all, but looking at the veteran as it is in the existing sandbox, there's one thing that I would request to have changed. Fully loaded, the passive should be intrinsic to the veteran, and Shock Trooper should be moved from its current location to the location that fully loaded would have previously been at. In the veteran's current state, this alleviates the nerf that was given to the plasma gun just a little bit, and it opens up the build possibilities for every single one of the veteran's last gun weapons. Additionally, when compared to the other classes that have this talent, the Arbitrator, the Ogryn, and the Qatari, it makes sense that the veteran just intrinsically has access to this talent and that they don't have to waste a talent point on the passive. It wouldn't break the class, and it wouldn't even break the game. It wouldn't take any enjoyment away from other players. It would just give veteran players access to this major quality of life feature that they probably already should have had. But hey, maybe you don't agree at all, and that's perfectly fine. Maybe the veteran is completely fine, and as someone who primarily has mained the veteran up until this point, I'm just overreacting to changes in the sandbox. But I have way more fun playing nearly every other ranged playstyle in the game, and I don't have much fun playing as the veteran anymore. As always, I appreciate your viewership, and a huge shout out and thank you to the channel's members and subscribers. This has been Jefficus, and the Emperor Protects.